This is Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to rank all of my cars. People have been ranking things on YouTube lately, and I'm certainly not above a trend, so I'm going to rank all of my cars, starting with the ones I own now, but I'm also going to do all of my cars that I've ever owned in order from worst to best.
Before we get started, are you ready for your next cool car? Sell your enthusiast car on Cars and Bids. Trading in your car to dealers means you aren't getting market value for your car, leaving you with less cash for your next fun car. Just look at our recent sales of these cool cars compared to current trade-in value. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is the trade-in offer, and this is the Cars and Bids result. Get started now on carsandbids.com. Sell on Cars and Bids and join the best community to sell your enthusiast car.
Okay, so ranking all of my cars. I have owned some crazy number of cars. I'm only going to rank the special cars that I've owned. I'm going to skip kind of the daily driver, boring cars that I got for kind of regular transportation purposes, because it's honestly kind of hard to put that in a ranking against like a Viper and a 996 Turbo and things like that. That's kind of a weird thing. How does my Sequoia fit into that? So I'm only going to rank the special, fun, exciting cars that I've owned. But I'm going to start by ranking my current cars, and I will include my daily drivers in that. So, current cars, starting from the worst to the best. I have 7 cars right now. If you know my cars, you can probably easily figure out this ranking. I'm not going to spend that much time on it. Worst car that I own now, at least from my perspective, is my Toyota Sequoia TRD Pro, which honestly is a pretty good worst car to own. It's a very capable vehicle, hauls around my family, is tremendously capable off-road. I think it looks pretty cool. It certainly drives well. It's got a great powertrain. It's got decent technology. Really, really good car. There are some things I don't like about it, which is why it goes here, like the camo fenders, and I think that the packaging in the interior could be a little bit better, but generally speaking, it really, really fits what I needed in a full-size SUV, even though it is my worst car. Next worst, which I guess is my 6th best car right now, my Mercedes-Benz E450 All-Terrain. That's my other daily driver. Between the two daily drivers, I certainly prefer the Mercedes-Benz, which also has 3-row seating. And the Mercedes, they're rear-facing in the cargo area, very unusual. The Mercedes is just an amazing daily driver car. It is comfortable, the tech is good, it is soft and smooth. The powertrain, which is this Mercedes turbo hybrid straight 6, it is excellent, like a truly excellent powertrain that just really has a fantastic amount of torque and power at basically any RPM, and yet it's not overwrought. You know, I've owned 2 AMG station wagons in the years before, and this car has almost the same performance level, but without all the stuff that comes with the AMGs, the lowered suspension, the harsher ride, and the exhaust note, and all that stuff. I truly love this E450 All-Terrain, even though it's my 2nd worst car, because of course I love my special cars more. And so my worst of my special cars right now is my Mercedes-Benz G500 Cabriolet. Love this car. It's great. It does great driver duty with, you know, the roof down, the kids in the back. It's a lot of fun. However, the driving dynamics are awful. It's old, you know, kind of slow lumbering thing. It's certainly more dynamic and adept than my Land Rover Defender was, which it essentially replaced, but it's still like not particularly exciting, particularly fun. There's not much it can do to even make it particularly exciting or fun. People put bigger motors in them, but it doesn't really change the dynamics of kind of a box on wheels without a lot of structural rigidity. I like that car a lot, but it's definitely my least favorite of my special cars. Moving on to my next least favorite, my Porsche 993 Turbo. I have 4 very special sports cars, and so the 993 Turbo is my 4th. It's the one I got most recently, is the least valuable, and it is the one that I like the least if I am ranking them. There are things I love about the 993 Turbo, including its sort of daily driver, daily usable capabilities. Got 4 seats I can bring my kids when I'm going out in the rain, when I'm taking the dog to date daycare, I can bring the 911 Turbo, and that's wonderful. The drawback, though, is it's just not as special as the Ford GT, the Countach, and the Carrera GT. Those cars are just more special. They're more fun. They're more exciting. And so the 993 Turbo does a great job doing like daily sports car duties, but my other three sports cars, I just simply prefer. They are just cooler and better. Ranking the top three was surprisingly hard. That's kind of the most interesting part of the current cars ranking. I think my number three most favorite car that I own right now is the Ford GT. I had a long time going between the Ford GT and the Carrera GT. There are things I really, really love about both of these cars. The Ford GT's benefits over the Carrera GT are it is way more usable, it feels way more robust, it's far more drivable, like it's just, it doesn't have clearance problems on the ground, the clutch is a lot easier to operate, car just feels like it's a lot more reliable, a lot more stout. It is a really, really, really nice, well done car. It's also a lot less expensive. I think my Ford GT is worth $375,000. I think my Carrera GT is worth $1 million more than that. And that definitely weighs in my driving experience when I'm using these cars. I just prefer, the car that isn't as every little thing on the road is terrifying to me kind of situation. The Carrera GT definitely requires more effort to be careful and that sort of thing. And so in that sense, the Ford GT is the better car. There are, however, some significant benefits of the Carrera GT. The biggest is it just drives better. It's kind of funny, these supercars, you don't really get, like what makes the Ford GT a $160,000 car when it was new, and in the same year, the Carrera GT when it was new was a $440,000 car. Why is that? You don't understand that until you drive them, and you realize just the level of the feel and the engineering difference between the two cars. The Carrera GT is an absolute precision instrument. It is a scalpel. It is incredibly tight and precise in a level that is absolutely amazing. The Ford GT is all those things, but not even close to the level that the Carrera GT is. When you drive these two cars back to back, it's almost amazing. The Ford GT, which I previously felt was this incredible car with amazing steering and handling, suddenly the steering feels sloppy and the front end feels light. And that's the difference between a $150,000 car and a $450,000 car. I also like the fact that the Carrera GT blends in more. Even though I'm more anxious about driving it because of its value, the general public is not anxious about being around it, and I don't get a lot of crazy like, oh my God, in the Carrera GT. It's just a pretty standard experience. Which is nice, actually. It really kind of flies under the radar, and obviously my Ford GT and my Countach really don't. And so, because I'm a driver and these cars are primarily used sparingly to drive, the Carrera GT beats out the Ford GT overall in my life, simply because it is just a vastly better driving experience. And I wouldn't even thought that you could have a vastly better driving experience than the Ford GT, which really drives great, but you can't. And it's the Carrera GT. However, unquestionably, my number one favorite car that I own right now is my Lamborghini Countach. I just love that car. There's a lot of, it doesn't drive all that well, people say. I've started to realize the Countach is a really great bellwether to show whether you're an enthusiast or a rich guy. You can be both. But I have noticed there have been some collections, some people who wanted a Countach their whole lives, and then they got one, and the Countach didn't drive like their McLaren, where you press a button, you start it up, and you put your drink in a cup holder, and so they got rid of it. They couldn't handle it. It was too much car for them. You have to be a real enthusiast to put up with a Countach, and a vintage car in general. I mean, my Countach hasn't given me any more problems than a regular vintage car would. It's just on a higher cost scale. If you are into it, it is the coolest damn thing in the world. I just love it so much that it's actually hard to really explain. And so the Countach is number one. I love using it. It is not as fast or as precise or as enjoyable to drive as the Ford GT or the Carrera GT, but it is just such an amazing experience. It is a cultural icon. It is loud. It is fast. It is just plain cool every time I drive it. Now, I want to move on to the lifetime cars that I have owned, starting with the worst and going to the best. And I'm just going to kind of motor through this. I've had a lot of cars, and again, I'm not including daily drivers on this list for the most part. It is just kind of the fun, special cars that I've had. So starting from the worst fun car I've ever had, my Mercedes-Benz A140, my A-Class. Horrible thing. Went to Europe, you know, as an adult. It was basically the first time I went to Europe and saw them on the street. I'd always seen pictures, thought it was the coolest thing, the way it looked, you know, this little weird classification of car that we didn't really have in the States, a sort of tall hatchback. And subsequently went to Europe a bunch of times, saw more of them, liked them, wanted to have one, brought one in, and it was a terrible experience. And what I've learned from this is, just because a car looks cool doesn't necessarily mean you need to own it. You can appreciate it with a model. More on that coming up. But anyway, that is the worst car I've owned. Recently got word, by the way, that my famous A-Class that I brought in and sold on Cars and Bids, it was so bad, by the way, that I sold it to a guy who only had it for a few months. He sold it to a guy who only had it for a few months. He sold to a guy back on Cars and Bids in California out here. And I recently heard that the A-Class got hit while parked. Which is not a shame. Anyway, okay, next worst car, my original Hummer. I had an AM General Hummer wagon. There are things I liked about the Hummer, and I actually still occasionally kind of casually browse Hummer listings. I like how it looks. I like how capable it is. I kind of like the feel of driving it. But mostly I hated it. Mine had a gas V8. It was underpowered. They're all underpowered unless you have an Alpha with the Duramax. The interior packaging is laughably bad. In order to get the portal axles and get all the stuff inside the cabin basically to allow for the maximum possible ground clearance, the car is totally compromised from an interior perspective, and there is no car that is worse with interior space than an AM General Hummer. And I lived in Center City, Philadelphia, like a big city at the time, and having a Hummer was just a laughable experience. And super glad I no longer own that car. Next one, my Nissan S-Cargo. I actually loved my Nissan S-Cargo, but it was slow. It was an automatic. It was carbureted, so sometimes it was a little bit difficult to start up. It was fine. Like, it was a cool looking thing, but it's another example of me, in the past, I have seen cars, how they look, and thought, I have to have one of those. And when you get it, you realize that actually the ownership and driving experience isn't really special beyond the way it looks. So again, it's better to just have a model. And the S-Cargo was a really good example of that. It was fine. It was kind of cool to drive around for a little bit. There was a little bit of novelty to it. But once that wore off, you were sitting in kind of a cheap Japanese underpowered automatic transmission hatchback that was only really cool when you parked it and looked back at it. Okay, next worst on my list, the Mercedes-Benz 500e. I owned a 93 Mercedes 500e. This was the car that was built sort of in concert with Porsche and Mercedes-Benz in the early 90s. Just didn't like it. And in fact, this whole experience kind of soured me from the W124 Mercedes-Benz E-Class in general, which was the one that was sold from 86 to 95. 94. I liked the 500e. It just, having owned later E-Class AMG cars and later E-Class models, it was slow steering, slow driving, even with the big motor from Porsche. The stylistic upgrades were simply too subtle. Even though I like a good subtle fast car, that one was too under the radar. It was fine. It wasn't all that special. The steering was slow. The interior wasn't that great. It just, I don't know. I never really have gotten into the W124 like some people my age have gotten into the W124. I'm more of a W210 guy. That was the next generation E-Class, 96 to 02. That's sort of sacrilege to the early E-Class people because the 210 wasn't built as well, but it was just more athletic. And I think I didn't like that about my 500e. Okay, next one on my next worst list, E36 BMW M3. I owned a 98 M3 sedan. And I gotta say, beginning now on my list, we're actually getting into cars that aren't even bad. I'm just sort of starting to rank. My list is like the worst cars, the best cars, and this sort of middle section where they were all kind of fine. And my E36 M3 was fine. It was my very first time that I experienced something that I have later come to really understand, which is that a lot of 90s cars, even the special ones, were just not built all that well. There was a lot of cheap plastic, a lot of stuff that gets brittle and breaks, a lot of dashes that crack in the sun. And I liked that car a lot, but I just never could shake the feeling. Like one time the shifter came off in my hand and, there would be rattles and things like that. And it was just the reality of a lot of stuff that came out of the 90s. These automakers, it seemed like in the late 80s, early 90s, discovered plastic. And then throughout the 90s, kind of radically overused plastic to the point where it really became kind of excessive and was kind of ruining car interiors. And I think there's a lot of 90s cars that, as good of performers as they are, the the way they were built just kind of discredits them from being like great long-term special cars. And I certainly felt that way about the E36 M3. And later I'll mention my Audi RS2 Avant, which I felt similarly. My 911 Turbo, my 993 911 Turbo, 1996, it's actually a little bit different. I'm kind of surprised. There was a lot of plastic, and in some cases more than there should, and some stuff has fallen off. But mostly, that car, one of the nice things about Porsche not having any money at that era was that they were able to, they kind of kept a fairly simple interior, so they didn't get into this kind of overwrought, like the E36 M3 had this turned dashboard that faced you, and there was plastic. It was just a little, it was too much plastic. I liked driving the car, and of course the US market E30 M3s were also underpowered for what they were. I enjoyed driving the car, but I just felt it was a little bit too fragile. Speaking of too fragile, next on my list of worst or best is the Lotus Elise. I owned a 2006 Lotus Elise in 2012. I bought it in San Jose, California, in the Bay Area, and I drove it home to Atlanta, Georgia. Got a speeding ticket in Kansas. I liked the Elise. There's a lot of stuff I liked about the Elise. I liked how reliable it was because it had a Toyota powertrain, and I liked that powertrain. That powertrain has been a good engine in every car it has ever gone into, including the Corolla XRS and the Matrix S XRS. It was great. And I also like the fact that you can buy and sell an Elise for the same money, basically. I loved how it looked. I thought it was cool. The drawback of the Elise was the same drawback that I was just mentioning with the M3. It was just too fragile. Like, you know, the Elise, the doors don't have stoppers. So you open the doors on a hill and they smash into you. You're sitting in the car and there's no like padding anywhere. So like my knees, my shins are kind of going up against this kind of aluminum interior. It's not quality. The entire body, the entire clamshell of the car is one piece. So if you damage something, you have to kind of replace that whole thing. You can't really do a lot of work on it, which makes it kind of fragile feeling. And I bought the Elise coming out of Porsches that I had as company cars, and I just remember thinking the Elise would have the same experience, and it just doesn't. It is fun, it is light, it is tossable and exciting, but the drawback is that compared to like more accomplished sports cars like a Porsche 911 or even a Mustang, an Elise just feels like a fragile little car. And I never really bonded with it for that reason. And I owned it for about a year, and eventually no one would ride in it with me anymore. Everybody was like, I'm sick of the ride quality, I'm sick of the attention, I'm sick of the buzziness, I want out. And so I got out. Next worst car on my list, we're up to number 14 here, my Aston Martin V8 Vantage. Had an 06 V8 Vantage, did a lot of videos with it early in my YouTube career. I would say that car was fine. It wasn't incredibly special. It wasn't bad. It was a lot more reliable than people say it is, or than people think it is, which I think has contributed to them kind of flattening out on the depreciation curve. I actually really liked that car, except that it just wasn't special. Mine was silver. It didn't look that cool. I think it is a great first entrance for a lot of people into kind of the exotic car world. If you've had like an M3 and a Cayman, a Mustang, you want to try something like a little more exotic, the V8 Vantage is an amazing starting point, but I don't think it's ever anybody's like all-time dream car. You know, you can buy them for $35,000 to $45,000. They're fun. They're not that fast. They're not that crazy, but they do teach you, okay, exotic cars do things a little bit differently. The servicing is a little bit different. It kind of gives you a little bit of an entree into that world in case you want to step up to something a little bit more crazy, like the next car is a McLaren or a Ferrari 360 or kind of some of that base level exotic stuff. The V8 Vantage helps with that, but I don't think it's ever a car people really deeply fall in love with, and I certainly didn't. It drives well, it sounds okay, it looks good, like all that stuff was great, but it was never like a wow, this is insane kind of thing. Okay, next up on my list, number 13 best car I've ever owned, my R32 Nissan Skyline GTR. I actually loved this car. Believe it or not. It deserves to be positioned higher on this list. I really thought this was a great car to drive. It really gave me a great appreciation for the RB26, a great powertrain. This car steered well, it handled well, despite the fact that when you think of a Skyline GTR, you think of this like iconic kind of, you know, like all-encompassing vehicle. The R32s are really pretty athletic. They're tight, they're nimble, they're really good. The drawback to me, the sole drawback of this car was I really hated right-hand drive. There are some people I talk to who are like, love right-hand drive, no problem. There are some left-handed people I talk to who prefer it. There's some people who get used to it. I never did, and I never have in other right-hand drive cars I've driven. It always just seems Wrong. And it's not because it's right-hand drive, it's because I'm driving a right-hand drive car in a left-hand drive country. I've driven in Thailand and in Malta, obviously right-hand drive places, and it's fine, it like feels normal. But driving those cars here, you're just dealing with a little bit more. And it just makes you think about stuff that you don't want to think about while you're driving, like lane placement and shift pattern and position of the turn signal and the wiper and that sort of thing, when you just want to be enjoying the experience. I never was able to fully enjoy my R32 experience because I never truly felt comfortable in a right-hand drive car. Next up on my list at number 12, my Range Rover Classic. Had a 95 Range Rover Classic, loved it, super cool car. I've been a Land Rover guy for a while, haven't had one in a long time now. It's been several years since I've had a Land Rover, but I really loved my Classic. I love how they look, I love how they drive, I love how they feel. That car really has a king of the road kind of presence to it that later Range Rovers never really did. The next gen Range Rover certainly didn't, and of course those are kind of cheap breakable cars. The ones after that, the L322 was great, but it was just got more common. The original Range Rover Classic was just, the Queen had it. It was like a very special thing, and I had a nice one, green 95 final model year. It was a good car. Drawbacks were it was slow, it was loud, and it broke down all the time. Was never quite the daily driver that I hoped it would have been. Next up, number 11, best car I've ever owned, my 2001 Mercedes-Benz E55 AMG. I loved my W210 E55. I bought that car with 49,000 miles from a Honda dealership in Atlanta, and it is just the best damn car. W210 E55 to me got it exactly right. It wasn't as fast as later AMG models, obviously, but it was also so subtle, and it felt more athletic. They just did a good job of making it not feel so like heavy and burdened with a big motor that it felt like it was a little bit more athletic and capable. It almost felt like AMG was sort of in an era where they could have gone more towards M, but they instead went towards more all-engine muscle cars, which I have no problem with. AMG turned into that, and it's great. I just loved that car. I loved how reliable it was, easy to own, easy to service. I loved how it looked, and even to this day, I'm still looking for a station wagon version now because that's one of the only cars in my past, in my history, that I miss and that I would buy again. Okay, next up, number 10, best car I've ever owned, my Cadillac CTS-V Wagon. Had an 11 CTS-V Wagon, loved it. Very fun, very dynamic, very fast. A lot of people complain about the interior and the tech in that car. I didn't mind it. I owned that car when it was only a couple years old, so it was fairly new stuff at the time. Loved how it looked. Drawbacks were mine was silver, pretty much under the radar, and it was an automatic, which it was better for daily driving, which is how I used it, but I think it would have been more fun if I had had 3 pedals. Really enjoyed that car. Not really a true family car, though. Ultimately, I've always said that Mercedes AMG wagon is a wagon first and a performance car second. The CTS-V wagon was a performance car first and a wagon second. It just wasn't as practical as I think it could have been. But I enjoyed it. I had that car maybe a year, did a lot of content with it, and I really enjoyed it. Okay, next up, my number 9 favorite car I've ever owned, my Dodge Viper GTS. I had a 97 Viper GTS, blue with white stripes. It's another car I've thought about buying another one of. Bought and sold mine for about 34 grand. They're about double that now. I had it in 2015. It was cool. It was just a cool car. I guess the Ford GT is sort of a better Viper, right? Like it looks cooler, it's mid-engine, it's much more precise, much more special, rarer. But I did always like the raw feel of that Viper and the way it looked. And I recently drove another one for a video. I'm not sure if it's gone up yet, but I think it just did. And I really liked it. Like, it is a compromised car, but that's also kind of what's fun about it. Things I didn't love about the Viper, it was wonderful that it was so cheap to own, cheap to maintain, cheap to repair stuff, but it was also cheap to use. Like, it was just not a very precise, refined instrument at all, so you really have to be okay with that. But I liked everything about it. And at the time, I also liked that it was cheap to buy, which it isn't quite as much anymore. And I think when that car goes into the 60, 70, $100,000 value range, it starts to become a little bit less appealing. Okay, next up, my next favorite car of all time, which is actually number 9, even though I just said it was number 9. It's a complicated list. My next car is my 996 Porsche 911 Turbo. I had a 2001 911 Turbo. It was great. Really it taught me about Porsches. It taught me about how capable they can be. They can be fast and usable and kind of fit under the radar, fly under the radar. It was a cool car. It drove well. Drawbacks of that car, the early 996 turbos, they weren't that great. They didn't have a glove box. My car had some miles. The interior wasn't that great. It could have been a little nicer. I think if I had had a nicer 996 turbo, I probably would have kept it longer. But that car really taught me about like the benefit of Porsches, like what Porsches can be, which is sort of this all-capable thing, that it can be fast and crazy and insane, but also pretty usable. And I really enjoyed that car. It was pretty unreliable, despite the fact that a lot of people have good experiences with that car. I didn't have a great one. Next up on my list, number 8, my Audi RS2 Avant. I bought this car. I had wanted one for years, and I think this car is the holy grail for me of cars that look cool. That doesn't mean you need to buy them. I bought that car. I still think it is the coolest looking car I have ever owned. I had it in RS Blue is what they called it at the time, later became Nagaro Blue or Sprint Blue. I loved how that car looked. I still love how that car looks. When I see pictures of them, I'm scrolling on Instagram through a car show and I'm F50, F40, I get to an RS2, I still stop and stare at it. I think it is so cool. It did not drive great. It was fine, but again, 90s cars, rattly interior, stuff never worked perfectly. There was sort of a pervasive small coolant smell. Stuff was brittle. Like, it just wasn't that nice to sit in or be in. And it just, 90s cars didn't quite get there in terms of quality of drive. Like, the turbo lag was significant. I loved the small sizing, but the clutch wasn't great. The shifter feel wasn't great. Like, then it was the next generation, like the early 2000s, where they really figured a lot of that stuff out. And indeed, the next generation of that car, the B5 RS4 Avant, was a fantastic car. The RS2, as cool as it looked, didn't quite do it for me. I had 3.5 years, something like that, and then I moved it on, and I've never regretted getting rid of that car. I was also always kind of a little bit nervous about reliability. It's a stout motor, but Audis from that era, there's not a lot of people who will work on them, and I was just never sure. Next up, number 7 on my list, my 97 Land Rover Defender. Loved my Defender, provided me with some true core memories of the early part of kind of my adulthood. I bought that car for $63,000 in like 2016, and I sold it for $93,000 a couple years ago. That car was my wedding getaway car. I brought it to my honeymoon, drove it on the beach a ton. It was a fun car. My friends and I would sit in the car and scream the lyrics to whatever pop song was popular at the time with no roof on, and we just had so much fun. But ultimately, a couple things won out. Number one, it wasn't safe enough as I had kids, but also it was just so rough. And eventually you get tired of being in a rough, loud truck that's crashy and bumpy. And eventually we had to move on to the G Wagon, which is, anti-lock brakes and airbags and just a much more rational thing. Okay, next up on my list, number 5, is the Ferrari 360 that I owned when I first kind of started my YouTube channel in 2013. I bought a red 360 manual transmission coupe. I really liked that car. And at the time I was disappointed by it. Because I think I had thought that having a Ferrari would be this unbelievable experience that would change my life forever, and it really didn't. But looking back on it, that car had a lot of the things I like. It was about the size, the power, the feel of driving it, sort of the way it shifted directions and how kind of flat and stable it was. I really think that was a special car, a good car. And when I look back at all of the cars that I've ever owned and sold, that is probably the very best car that I have owned in the past and do not own anymore. And indeed, the top 5 cars on my list are my current top 5 cars, which are my G500, my 993 Turbo, my 4 GT, my Carrera GT, and my Countach. I'm happy to say that I have never sold one of my favorite cars, and I've never had to have that experience of loss, like, oh no, what do I do? Do I buy it back or something? I've pretty much only sold cars I wanted to sell, and I'm pretty happy with the cars that I have sold. But I do sometimes think about how I maybe squandered my Ferrari 360 experience a little bit, hoping for something that it wasn't and not really appreciating what it was, which was kind of a Cayman, but more exotic, more Italian, a little bit more flair, better sound, better looks. That definitely is a special car, and it deserves kind of the rise in values that it's had over the last couple of years. So there you go. Those are my cars ranked in order from worst to best. That A-Class. Never again will I buy anything like that. My Audi A2, the company owns, I'm so glad that'll be going away too. There's just not a reason to buy a car like that. When the Europeans tell you it's a boring car, even if it looks cool, believe them. Anyway, that's my list. There you go.